Shalom, I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz. I'm the rabbi of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia, speaking to you from the pulpit of our synagogue on the occasion of the 250th anniversary of American independence. My message is entitled, A Jewish Meditation for Independence Day. What is special about American Jewish history? On this Independence Day, the milestone 250th anniversary of the birth of our nation, I hope to lead us beyond the headlines of the day and to examine at a fundamental level what is special about the experience of Jews in America. To appreciate how different that experience has been from much of the rest of Jewish history, let us recall some basic facts. For 2,500 years, ever since the Babylonian exile, the Jewish nation has lived under the rule of some Gentile overlord. That situation only changed 3/4 of a century ago with the rebirth of the modern state of Israel. For most of the 2.5 millennia, the Jewish people were treated as a corporate entity within the state. We were not citizens. Of course, our Gentile neighbors were not citizens either in any modern sense. The rulers of the state dealt with groups. Governments did not have the literate bureaucracy, the transportation and communication abilities, or the transpersonal sense of loyalty to a state rather than to a ruler to operate in our modern manner. In the Christian-ruled part of the world, the groups that made up society included the nobility, the townsfolk, the guilds, the Christian clergy, the peasantry, and the like. These were corporate entities whose members enjoyed a greater or lesser number of privileges. There was no notion of equal rights. As a group, the Jews had more rights, more privileges, that is, than the peasants, but fewer privileges than most others. But even the peasants were part of the state in a way that the Jews were not. In medieval Christian theory, the ecclesiastical hierarchy represented the right hand and the temporal political rulers, the left hand, of properly constituted state authority. Christian peasants were part of the church universal. Jews were not. Similarly, in Muslim lands, Jews were not part of the Ummah, the Muslim nation. Along with the Christians living under Islamic rulers, the Jews of those lands were a tolerated alien presence, often barely tolerated. They paid for the right to be non-Muslim by submitting the jizya, the poll tax, and often in a deliberately humiliating manner. In that world, the Jewish community had its own internal autonomy. The overlord demanded lump sum payments of taxes, which the Jewish community then apportioned internally. To secure its own revenues, therefore, the government, even if hostile to Judaism, supported the internal autonomy of the Jewish community. For that reason, there was no freedom of choice regarding how much of the Jewish tradition any individual Jew would follow. If he failed to live by the rabbinically ordained standards of conduct, he was liable to a variety of punishments, up to excommunication. That was a very powerful penalty, because an excommunicated Jew could not buy food or obtain lodging in the Jewish community. In practice, excommunication either resulted in conversion away from the faith, or else it brought the sanctioned individual to heel. That world of involuntary governmentally recognized Jewish life crumbled with the rise of the modern secular state. Quiet, under-the-radar Jewish life was winked at in Georgian England, but the British Parliament rejected a mid-18th century attempt to normalize Jewish status in the United Kingdom. The situation was more fluid in His Britannic Majesty's Atlantic colonies. Some colonies were less hospitable to dissent from the religion of the local majority, Congregationalism in Massachusetts and the Anglican Church in Virginia. But in colonies such as Georgia, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, New York, and Rhode Island, Jewish communities were tolerated. The decisive opening for Jewish participation in a new society on a newly equal basis came with American independence. The revolution against King George was also a rejection of the established state church, whose defender was the British monarch. While the status of Jews in the new United States of America was still murky during the pre-constitutional period, the Constitution prohibited the use of any religious tests to screen federal office holders. Then, in the Bill of Rights, Congress went further and prohibited the federal government from making any religious establishment. Jews, along with other non-Protestants, were now officially equal citizens. Much the same movement happened shortly thereafter in post-revolutionary France. The French-born Jew and the French-born Protestant were now citizens, along with the large majority of French-born Roman Catholics. The French and the American models diverged to some degree. The French model was more hostile to organized religion because of the historic legacy of the cooperation of the Roman Catholic Church in France with the absolute monarchy. In the United States, Jews were under less pressure to confine their religion to the purely private sphere. Congregations, social welfare institutions such as the, quote, Female Hebrew Benevolent Society, Philadelphia, 1819, and fraternal organizations such as B'nai B'rith, New York, 1843, sprang up in the first century of American Jewish life. But the crucial change was as true in America as it was in France. Here, a Jew did not need to belong to the Jewish community. He was free to practice the teachings of his faith or to ignore them. He was free to pursue his legal actions in state and federal courts. He could be as Jewish as he wanted to be and to assimilate if he so chose. Much of what we take for granted today in the variety of forms of modern Judaism is a response to that new reality. The Reform movement, the first organized American Jewish religious movement, was an attempt to shed the practices of Judaism that rendered Americanization more complicated. Americans ate pork and shellfish and mixed dairy and meat. And so the banquet at the first ordination of the Reform movement's Hebrew Union College proudly served all those foods. More traditionally minded Jews felt that this was akin to throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Hence, the emergence of the other two main denominations in American Jewish life between 1880 and 1920, conservative and Orthodox Judaism. We ought to remember, though, that even the more traditional of the Jewish options operated in a radically different environment than the Jews of the pre-modern ghetto or shtetl. In this country, Jews were enjoying the free exercise of their religion as promised by the Bill of Rights, not the coerced adherence to Jewish norms that fit within the political straitjacket of pre-modern Jewish life. Today, not quite half of world Jewry lives in the United States, and about half lives in Israel. The path chosen there is quite different. Although it is a modern society with freedom of religion, it does not have a separation of synagogue and state. The ultra-Orthodox have followed a model in Israel, first essayed with the founding of the political party Agudath Yisrael in Poland, 1912. Its path is to function as a political party and to wield the levers of government to protect ultra-Orthodox interests. In fact, the Agudath Yisrael in the State of Israel treats the state in much the same way as it had treated the Gentile government in interwar Poland, as a foreign power to be lobbied, not as an expression of the loyalty to the collective community of the Jewish people. The large majority of Israelis, understandably, are offended by the holier-than-thou attitudes of Israel's ultra-Orthodox, and they deeply resent the concessions that Israeli governments have made to that community. The exemption of yeshiva students from military service and the lavish funding of ultra-Orthodox institutions in an era of high defense expenditures has reinforced a divide within Israel Jewish society that we must acknowledge as dismaying. The majority of Israeli Jews regard themselves as secular, not reform, not conservative, not reconstructionist, not renewal, not the various shades of the spectrum of religious observance that are familiar to us. That is the unfortunate side effect of a coercive model of engagement with society chosen by the ultra-Orthodox. Because their Judaism is so high profile, their arrogance and their overreach have given Judaism itself a bad name in the broader circles of the Israeli Jewish world. I am clear-sighted about the dangers and the weaknesses of our American style of Jewish life, in which assimilation makes deep inroads into the continuity of our people. At the same time, the non-establishment of religion forces the teachers of Judaism to speak to the hearts of the broader community. One of the results of the voluntary nature of Jewish life is the ever higher number of sincere converts to Judaism. In our sanctuary, this past Sabbath morning, the percentage of those who have chosen the Jewish path in their adult years was about 1/3 of all those present. That is significant, and all the more significant because it is not unusual. In a deeper way, all Jews in this American world, both those born into Jewish families and those who've joined our ranks, are Jews by choice. This adds both power and beauty to the way that Jewish people are Jewish. To bring this back to Torah, when the children of Israel were gathered around Mount Sinai, God invited them to say yes to the offer of covenant. The people responded, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. That, and not religious coercion, not the marriage of religion and power politics, that is the way. May our experiment in voluntary religious self-definition endure and prosper. Amen.